I think AI will definitely take jobs. Generally, that happens with every technology wave, and then people move on to better, more intellectual things.
Jesse Zhang, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, AI agents are talk of the town. Every other company is creating an AI agent to do some sort of task. But what does that actually mean?
So at Decagon, we do AI customer service agents. So a simple example would be, let's say we're working with a big airline. Then essentially what would happen is every single end user that interacts with the airline can use the AI agent as the first point of contact to get whatever they need. And so it's the same as calling a concierge or texting someone, and it can book flights for you, it can upgrade your seats, it can answer questions you might have about your loyalty points. And the reason why it's so exciting right now is that AI is now kind of gotten intelligent enough where it just feels like a human, and you can have it be available 24/7, any language, and it can do all sorts of things for you.
Mm-hmm. How did you get the idea for it? Because Decagon, is one of the few AI agent companies that kind of made it big early on. As I said, like now every other startup is trying to find their niche within this AI agent thing. So how did you get the idea for it? What was the story? What's the story behind it?
Yeah, so my co-founder, who's awesome, Ashwin, he and I have pretty similar approaches to starting companies, which is, we think that whenever there's a big technology shift, and in this case with AI, it just opens the door for a lot of companies. But really the number of great ideas is usually pretty small. And so your job as a founder is to try to figure out what those are, ideally at the beginning of the cycle. And the only real way you can do it, besides guessing, is spend a lot of time with customers. And so what we did at the early days was we went out there, we tried to pack a whole day with meetings, talking to all sorts of different just sort of like enterprises, right? So it could be tech companies or banks or retail stores and so on. And we were just exploring. So we were trying to figure out what would people find useful, how would they think about the ROI, how would they think about actually making an investment in AI. And we kind of repeated that cycle for a couple weeks, right? Try to have a full day of meetings, hack on stuff during the night, come back the next day, like, hey, we built this thing, like, is this useful? And that was very helpful. I think it led us to figure out that there were a lot of use cases that people were excited about, but at the end of it, they didn't really feel like they had real, like investment opportunities for them to spend money and actually, invest in something. And so for us, we, went through that process, and the idea behind Decagon came out of that. So we had a lot of enterprises that were like, this use case will be helpful, but really over here we have 1,000 people in our contact center. It'd be great if you could do something there. And so they kept pushing us towards this idea, and that's how we started Decagon.
And are you staying focused on, customer service, customer support, or do you think Decagon would branch out of that at some point?
Eventually, yeah. So at the core of what we're doing is we're becoming very good at having conversations. Okay. And so at the core, what Decagon is, it's a conversational AI engine. We want to build the smartest and most human-like and most empathetic agents that can have conversations with folks. In the context of enterprises, that can be a lot more than just customer service, right? You can kind of have proactive conversations. You can have conversations to get people more engaged or get them to convert into something, or just be like a partner for the end customer. And that's really exciting. I mean, that's where we're going ultimately. I think customer service is the best first starting point, and we have very high conviction in that now because it's the use case where people are just like, oh yeah, I get it. Like I'm spending 50 million right now with Decagon, I can spend 10 million, so it's great. But eventually as we expand, we've already started talking with a lot of our current customers about other types of conversations we can take on. And that's ultimately where we think the industry is going.
Do you have your own models that you're training, or are you working with OpenAI or Anthropic or something like that?
It's a mix of both.
Okay.
So we are in the layer of the tech stack called the application layer, and so that's the sort of final layer that's actually solving business problems or interacting with users. And generally, people in the application layer like us need to be model agnostic. And so you have to use Anthropic, use OpenAI, use Google, and fine-tune your own models. Why would you fine-tune your own models? Well, generally, it's because you can make things a lot faster and more performant and use smaller models. And so for us, for example, when we build our voice agents, and so you can call an agent, it just sounds like a human, it responds instantly. The latency there matters a lot, and so that's when you end up using your own models.
What makes Decagon's agents better than the other ones out there?
So we've taken kind of a unique approach from the rest of the industry. I think generally you can sum it up by we've made our agents a lot more sort of accessible to non-technical users to use.
Okay.
And generally, AI is a complex space. You often have to have, technical resources, engineers coming in, configuring the models and setting it up so that you can do what you want. And for us, we've just taken the view that, one of the beautiful things with the AI models is that they've really democratized how people can use them. It's super easy to communicate with them. It's very intuitive. And so we built our whole product around that. And so far, that's been resonating with the market.
Yeah, I mean, $231 million raised at a $1.5 billion valuation. That's a lot. How did that happen?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate with our investors. They've been great partners with us. Raising, actually, to be honest, has not really been something we thought much about when we started the company.
Okay.
We never really sought out funding or went out to raise. I think when we started, Ashwin and I were kind of in the fortunate position. We had, exited companies before. We knew a lot of investors personally, and so each one of our rounds actually so far has been preempted, and investors have come to us and been like, hey, we want to give you money at this price. And generally we're like, no, we're not really comfortable with that right now. But eventually, as our business has grown, we at some point are like, okay, it's time to raise the next round, and that's when we do it.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's maybe a sign of the times with AI right now is very hot, and a lot of people just see the potential in it, us included, of course. And so we are appreciative of it, but it's not really something we spend much time thinking about.
Very interesting. And yeah, it might be just a sign of the times, or it might be that, I don't know, your last company was sold to Google, acquired by Google. Tell me about that first company.
Yeah, I started the company right out of college, so I left a year early, and I just wanted to start a company. But generally, when you're a new grad, you're young, you don't really know what you're doing, and so it was 2 years of just random wandering around and a lot of ups and downs, a lot of just struggling to figure out what to build. And it's very painful at the time. I think it does teach you some things about how to evaluate ideas, and obviously this time things have gone a lot smoother, but timing also matters, the idea also matters. But eventually, I think we were very fortunate. We launched something that got a lot of traction. We were in the gaming space, and so we got acquired by Niantic, which spun out of Google. They're the makers of Pokemon Go, and so that was also a great experience. We worked with some fantastic people there, and around the time GPT-4 came out and the new wave of AI models, I was a solo founder the first time. This time, it just felt like, okay, I can't miss out on this wave.
What was a gaming startup? What were you actually doing?
The company was called Low-Key. We were doing essentially high-performance video capture for games. And so one way we'd often describe it is like Snapchat, but for your virtual experiences. And so when people are playing games, it's like running, and you can capture clips, and you can edit them and share them and post them and so on.
Mm-hmm. And at college, what were you studying? I want to know more about Jesse Zhang, the person.
Sure, yeah. So I went to Harvard for college, did computer science. My background was very mathy growing up. So when I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. And I would describe my upbringing and childhood as, I look back, I had a very happy childhood, but it was fairly hardcore, credit to my parents, I guess. And we just spent a lot of time, math competitions and really just spending time working. And I think that's kind of instilled some of that into us today as well, even into the culture of Decagon, where I think we assemble a lot of folks, that honestly have similar upbringings to me, where we really have bought into the vision. We really like working. We believe what we're working in, and we spend a lot of hours. And so that was me growing up. And I think a lot of people with mathy backgrounds, they end up choosing computer science and technical fields that are a little bit more applied. And a lot of my friends did go into more theoretical things like math professors and computer science professors and so on. But I even from high school, middle school, I was very sure that I wanted to do something more applied. And I saw a lot of my older friends from these contests doing companies and having some success. And so it just felt a lot less of a mythical thing that you could do. And it's just there's investors you can raise from, there's programs you can do, and that's how I got into it.
It's one thing to have a really, great technical background and know all these things and have an idea, and it's another to run a business. As CEO of Decagon now, and as someone who has previously founded and, sold a company, What have you learned about running a business?
Yeah, totally agree, by the way. So this is something I actually think about a lot. Throughout high school, college, I met so many super smart people. And honestly, building and starting a company you're kind of using a lot of the same problem solving skills, right? Because there's a lot of these like ambiguous problems that come up, and at the end of the day, you have to figure out like, okay, how do you think about the problem? How do you figure out a solution? And then you solve it. And so I think a lot of these like hyper intelligent people that were like, star academic folks growing up, I think could be applied very well in this business world. I think generally the thing that's not really taught and people, I don't think, invest in enough is just more of like I would describe it as more of a commercial sense.
Okay.
So like how do you do sales? How do you find customers? How do you evaluate if like a commercial opportunity is good or not? And that's not something you get taught in school. I don't even say you get taught that in business school or anything. It's just something you have to learn from experience or someone has to teach you. And so I actually think there's a huge amount of untapped talents and potential in that world of like people that were just like super strong at math or computer science or whatever that don't have enough training on commercial things and trying to smell out like where the opportunities are, how to do sales, how to do marketing. And I was fortunate. I had a lot of folks that were very good teachers or mentors who were older founders and so on. But also, I think I always just enjoyed that sort of thing. And I do think there's like a lot of untapped potential there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you like who have been some of your mentors in this space, whether those are investors or professors, anyone you would, whether it's one person or a few, anyone that's been really pivotal for your career.
Yeah, so there's both the older founders, like there's a lot of founders I obviously respect a lot. One of my favorites is Ali from Databricks, who has been kind enough to spend time with us. And I think that business is just like, one of the best businesses of all time. And they also have like one of the just cleanest, sharpest execution styles. And then for us as a company, so one of our board members, Arif from Bain, he's been absolutely awesome for us. He started several companies before. He's been an investor for a long time. He's just seen a lot of reps. And that's always helpful. Like no matter how smart you are, how smart you think you are as a founder, there's like no real replacement for experience and kind of seeing things succeed and fail. And so you have to kind of be mindful of trying to learn from those folks.
The Valley can be pretty cutthroat. How do you think about competition?
I actually think like any career path is competitive.
Yeah.
Competition is fun. You need competition to give yourself the fire and give your team enough fire to like really push. We have an extremely competitive team. One of our company's principles is like having a winner's mindset, and people are here to win. They enjoy winning. They work very hard, and a lot of that is rooted in building something that's a winning culture and a winning product. And I think it's part of the backgrounds that a lot of the team has as well. I mentioned, growing up doing a bunch of contests and competitions, and it just gives a lot of the work you're doing a little bit more meaning, I think, because there's results that are measurable and so on. So I don't view it as a bad thing, and I think I would argue that most career paths are pretty competitive anyways.
Yeah, what's like a typical day at the Decagon office?
So we are a fully in-office culture, which is nice. We have a nice big office in downtown San Francisco, and so people show up. The go-to-market folks usually get in a little bit earlier, and then engineers will get in a bit later and then stay later. And we're just all in sort of like the same space. And depending on your role, like for me these days, it's a lot of customer-related things, a lot of hiring-related things. And so lots of meetings during the day. For the engineers, we try to protect their time, and so they get as much, just like focused working time as possible. But everyone in the same space, get dinner with each other, get lunch with each other. People, have a lot of time just like chit-chatting.
Are you about that, the 9 to 9 life?
The 996?
Yeah, the 996.
Yeah. So, 996, as you probably know, came from the Chinese companies. And my parents are Chinese. I'm ethnically Chinese. So I've seen a lot of those environments firsthand. I can tell you that at least in this new AI world where a lot of companies are working really hard, I think it's still another level over there. There's a bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is that it's much harder to get a job over there. So the companies have a lot more leverage. So I actually don't think it's necessarily the time. I actually don't really believe in enforcing time and things like that. You want to just build a team that, if they have stuff to do, then they'll push through and do a good job on it. Our team, we're in the office 5 days a week. Some people come in on the weekends, but it's not required. And that works for us. I mean, other things might work for other companies. I don't think we also want to just have an intense culture to have an intense culture, right? Like we want one because people here believe in the mission, they believe what they're working on, they enjoy kind of being in in the fire, and being in the center of this new trend of AI. And yeah, like you said before, right? There's a lot of companies building in AI, building in our space, and so part of having competition and part of being in a fast-growing space is that people feel like they can invest the time, it's exciting, they have super smart people they're working with, and ultimately we want everyone who works at Decagon to view this as the highlight of their career. Like they got so much done, we made so much progress, they were able to accelerate their careers.
Do you feel like we are in a time where investors are just kind of throwing money at AI companies that they see have the potential to scale? Like, you mentioned that you didn't even seek this out, it came to you. And obviously you have the credentials for it, but we see it a lot. So much funding has gone into AI these past 2-3 years. As an insider, what's your take?
Yeah, I think these cycles are a little bit inevitable because no one can argue that AI is going to be super transformational. But at the end of the day, there's only going to be a small handful of truly generational companies. I mean, that's just by definition. But no one knows who they are, right?
Yeah.
Even now, I think it's still super early, so you can't really tell who they are. So as an investor, your job is to try to figure out who they are. And so far, it seems like it's been quite easy for a lot of these funds to raise a lot of cash. And if you have a lot of cash, where do you want to deploy the funds? Okay, you're probably going to look towards the AI space because that's where things are happening. And yeah, and that kind of leads to a little bit of imbalance where there's a smaller set of companies that are doing well and there's a lot of cash, and so it's easier to raise. And I don't think that's necessarily good or a bad thing. It really just means that the founders have to be a little bit more disciplined and try to do things in a more measured way and not just blow out the valuation because you can.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Do you want Decagon to be one of those generational companies? What's your long-term goal with it? Would it be something you want to, see through an IPO, or something you would be open to being acquired? And maybe you haven't thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something I would say most founders think about because
Okay.
you're kind of in the thick of it, right? But I would say, of course, we want to build a generational company. Ashwin and I have had exits before. We don't necessarily want to do that again. I think we are in this because we want to build something huge, really have a gigantic win for our entire team and everyone who's supported us. So I think we're very blessed to be in the right time and have the right opportunity and be working on the right thing at the moment. So yeah, we just want to keep going.
Mm-hmm. I want to know how, you have some really, really big customers. How did you land them? Especially in the beginning, was it you going out and pitching your company, or what did it look like?
Yeah, enterprise sales, not super easy. I've learned a lot about it and still a lot to learn. I mean, every company can do it differently. What works for us is that when you are selling our agent and trying to partner with big enterprises around their contact center and the conversational agents, it ends up being a pretty top-down initiative because our customers view this as, hey, this is our opportunity to have an AI transformation. It's going to be a big bet that we have in AI, and customer service is a very obvious use case, and so let's go there. And as a result, it's quite important for us to have alignment with the execs of the company. And so what's worked for us is we kind of go in, we work with the execs, we kind of convince them that our approach is the best approach, right? And as I mentioned before, our approach is really rooted around how can you empower and up-level all the non-technical users, all the business users in your organization. And people really like that vision, right? They might have engineers in the org, but you don't want the engineers on the hook for all these things, teaching the AI how to do, a reorder product or whatever. All these journeys and all these behaviors that you want the AI to learn. You want to empower the business users for that. And we kind of, talk them through this vision and really align with their AI strategy. And that's how we were able to get off the ground and land some of these customers. And from there, it gets slightly easier because they see, oh, this other company that I respect uses you, so let's try it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's your give me your best practical advice to other young founders out there that are trying to build and scale companies right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most relevant one is you have to really understand what your own strengths and weaknesses are. And another way of saying that is maybe try to ignore most advice out there, because I think what I found is most advice, most stories, first of all, there's a lot of sort of, polish on those stories that are not necessarily true, right? Like, you want to tell a good story, and so you kind of explain what happened, but you're not going to get all the details in it. And so when you listen to other people's stories or other people's advice and learnings, it's kind of a slightly doctored version of what happened, and it's probably not that applicable to you in the first place because it's a different company, different stage, different founders. And so I think probably the biggest thing is you need to have like a pretty deep understanding of yourself and what you're good at and where you can actually be world-class at something. And that's quite difficult. And so once you kind of build that intuition, then you can figure out the path that you should take and what type of product you should build and what your competitive differentiators are. Because otherwise, it's just super easy to be like, oh, well, I saw the story where, like Decagon did X, Y, Z, so let's try that. Or like some other company did X, Y, Z. And that can be really distracting because, it's not really the most relevant thing for your business. And I definitely felt this in my first company where I was very into listening to podcasts and news articles and so on and trying to apply learnings. But, it doesn't really work if it's like a completely different type of business and, completely different stage. And so, yeah, I think the most important thing is just stay focused and try to understand yourself and your team and go from there.
Absolutely. I love that you say that, people shouldn't take other people's advice always. But what's one business lesson or one piece of like ethos that you've kept throughout your entrepreneurial journey?
For us, it's to always put our customers first. And I mean, this is not a hot take, obviously, like a lot of companies do this, but we do this very aggressively. We do this even so far as to determine what things to work on. Even the idea for the company, right? We didn't start the company and be like, okay, instantly, customer service agents is the thing to build. We spent a lot of time with customers, and I think we've gotten quite good at having those conversations and figuring out what's the real signal in these conversations. And we try to apply that to everything, both in terms of how do we develop the product, how do we structure the team, and so on. So that's number one. And number two, I would say, is just that we have like a really high level of competitive spirit and intensity at Decagon, and that's served us well so far. That was the case at my last company as well. And just, I think it just comes from the personalities of the founders. Like Ashwin and I are both very competitive, and we have a lot of, I would say, like fire to just get stuff done. And that's, kind of permeated in the team as well.
Mm-hmm. Put aside Decagon for a second. What do you want Jesse Zhang's legacy to be?
I would say, hopefully Jesse has, helped start one of the most consequential companies in the AI era. But honestly, I don't really think too much time thinking about that. I think that can be for later after career's over.
After career's over?
Yeah.
All right. Lastly, do you think AI is going to replace human jobs? I mean, you're doing that for a certain, segment of companies, but, there's a fear instilled in the common individual about AI taking over. So
yeah, so I think AI will definitely take jobs, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't think there should be that much fear about it because generally that happens with every technology wave. A lot of jobs are kind of made redundant because the AI can do it faster and better, and then people move on to better, more intellectual things, right? So as an example, in customer service, now a lot of, they're called the tier one conversations, so the easiest conversations can be taken over by AI, and it's not really arguable that AI can do them super well, super consistently, super fast, 24/7. And obviously, if you're an enterprise, you would want AI to take those. But that doesn't mean that you'll need less humans because there's always more growth opportunities for the businesses, right? And so a lot of the contact centers or teams that we work with, over time what happens is that there's less and less of the workforce doing these tier one tickets, but they end up doing other things. And they could be even outside of customer service, like labeling data and things like that. And most of the stories we've seen of people really realizing massive gains and massive efficiencies in their operations, they're not really firing big swaths of people. I mean, these firms usually have very high level of churn in these jobs anyways, and so they kind of naturally phase out over time into other roles. And that's what I think will happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Cool. Thanks for having me.